Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin, and welcome to this week's episode of the Podiatry Legends podcast. Podcast designed to help you feel, see, and think differently about the podiatry profession. With me today is another legend who is not a podiatrist. It is Dave Fries. Now, Dave has been described as a Grandmaster of Persuasion and Influence. Now, I don't know if you've heard about Forbes magazine, but Steve Forbes is the guy that actually calls Dave Fries the Grandmaster. I've known Dave for a number of years now. He is just a renowned speaker all around the world. People just sit there in the thousands wanting to listen to what he has to say. And best of all, Dave is my friend. And I'm so glad he is on. I'm a friend and not an enemy, because he would persuade and influence me all over the place. So Dave, how are you doing today?
Good, Tyson. I'm very, very pleased to be here. I, like you, am honored to be called your friend.
And I'll just point out to people that Dave was on my other podcast, It's No Secret with Dr. T, a couple of times, and they were probably some of the most popular episodes. And there's a lot of podiatrists now who I've mentioned you before. So they've started hunting you down, stalking you at night, and listening to you on Unstructured with Eric Hunley and a number of other shows that you've been on. And the feedback from them was going, where's this guy been hiding? I was so glad they came across your material. So today we're going to talk about force multipliers. So can you describe what a force multiplier is?
So you didn't tell me what we're going to talk about, so I was trusting you completely. And you happen to have come up with one of my very, very favorite topics of all time. So I should preface it by saying I have always been a civilian, but I've been honored to work with many, many people in the armed forces of the United States and several other countries in the course of my career. And that is where I learned this. So this is my own spin on it, but force multipliers are something. It could be a weapon, or it could be a tool, or it could be a piece of software, it could be a type of training, but something that makes the soldier or the weapon more powerful than it would have been otherwise. So I've sort of broken down the business version of force multipliers into three categories. But before I tell you what they are, let me give you an example from the military. So the Pentagon considers, for example, night vision to be a 5 times or greater force multiplier, meaning that if we are able to choose to fight at night against the enemy and we have night vision and they don't, we should have a 5 times advantage. Now, force multipliers in business and in the military could sort of stack on one another and synergize one another. So if you take night vision and you provide it to a very carefully selected team of SEALs, for example, who have been selected for certain criteria and then given very advanced training, those two things, careful selection coupled with careful training coupled with night vision, can be a really gigantic force multiplier. And that's what we're looking for in business. We're saying originally the program that you have come to in the United States actually was formed around this idea. Let's take people who were in clandestine service, negotiators and interrogators and spies and special forces operators, and let's find out what were the force multipliers that they learned, that they have brought into the civilian world with them and have made their lives or their businesses better. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about that in my own case, as well as a lot of the people that I worked with through time. And we eventually, as I sort of plowed through them, we've found that the best way to teach them, and hopefully that the podiatrists listening today will be able to use, was this framework or structure I created: meta force multipliers, strategic force multipliers, and tactical force multipliers. I should probably take a breath and let you ask the question.
Oh, no. What I was going to say is the event that you were mentioning is Business Black Ops, which you normally hold in October every year in Tempe, Arizona, which I have been going to since 2015. Not the last 2 years, because I've been held prisoner in Australia and haven't been allowed to leave, but 2022, I will definitely be there. Or you guys are going to send a boat over here. You're going to sneak me out of the country. That was what the word was anyway. And I like what you said about that example about the Navy SEALs and the night vision going into battle. So what you're saying about the force multipliers, it's that times effect. So you can have someone who's a Navy SEAL, extra training, somebody you could give me night vision, and that might be very helpful. I won't trip over things. But if I'm in a battle, having that Navy SEAL training, putting those two things together is a lot more powerful than just having them individually.
Yes, sir. That's exactly correct. Were you at one of the business black ops where we had Jocko Willing?
Oh yeah, I upset Jocko. Remember?
That's right, you did.
I
Yeah,
upset Jocko, and he gave me death eyes. And then Tom Foster was saying, "I think Jocko wants to choke you out." I said, "I think he does." All I did was make a joke about his podcast. He asked me, "Do I listen to his podcast?" I said, "Yes, I do, Jocko, but it goes a little long."
Yes, you did say that. You did say that.
He got the shits with me.
So that, you know, Jocko and these guys who have lived this kind of training have been helpful in metaphorically in teaching all of the doctors and the therapists and the real estate agents and the lawyers and the business owners that come there, the real force multiplier that you're describing of training. So just about any force multiplier we could come up with could be made more powerful by figuring out a way, a system of providing training on it and then enhancing that training. So that's a really good example of this kind of multiplier of force multipliers.
Yeah. And I must admit, Jocko, when he spoke, was like really engaging, but gee, he just sucked the audience in with his stories. I think if anyone ever gets a chance to listen to Jocko talk, just go there and pay the price and listen, because what he's done as a Navy SEAL and then how he applies that and how he teaches that in business is just amazing. But don't upset him. That's my tip.
And if you wonder why, just Google Jocko Willink and go to images and you'll see why. For your listeners, by the way, he has a new product out in the United States, and it's called Jocko Go. It's a healthier energy drink, and he sells it through a chain of grocery stores called Wawa.
Oh yeah.
And if you Google Jocko Wawa commercial, I guarantee it'll put a smile on your face. Really very good.
Okay, let's get back on track, Dave, because I know the one thing I'll point out to people too, if you have OCD and you listen to Dave talk live, he will drive you nuts, because he'll go, okay, I'm going to give you 4 points on what on this particular topic. Point 1, point 2, and then he goes off on a story. Never comes back to point 3, but later he comes back to point 3, point 4, just for all the people that are going, you drove me nuts. What happened? You went totally off. So I'm just warn people listening to this, Dave has a tendency to go off, tell awesome stories, but always comes back, closes the loop.
I actually just did it. I teased that I had a framework of these 3 levels.
You did.
And then I came back to reveal what they are, but we haven't really explained them yet. So the anticipation is building in the audience. Well, here, let's pull back the curtain and reveal to the audience why this technique works, because everything Tyson and I are going to do and show you, you can use. And you probably already use lots of these techniques without realizing you're doing it. I mean, almost everybody could probably remember a time when they met somebody and they locked eyes and they just got along fabulously well and communication was clear as a bell. And then you can remember other times when the opposite was true.
Yeah.
Well, when you're communicating really effectively and clearly and succinctly and getting where you want to quickly in communication and building trust, you're doing these things that we're going to talk to you about here. So the little technique that Tyson described of tickling the idea makes you want to know, where is the information? So you're waiting for it and listening for it and begging for it. And so when I actually do reveal it, you're way more likely to absorb it and remember it.
Okay, makes sense.
That's one of the reasons that works. Yep. And then stories work. You alluded to this. Stories work, and I embed them in between the content, because we, all humans living today, are the descendants of people who listened really well to stories. So as we were transmitting information from one generation to another, not all that long ago, but before the written word, the only way we could get information about where to go for food and where to go for safe water and how to survive and how to avoid animal attacks was to listen to the stories that people that knew told us. And those great storytellers imparted that information to us, to our ancestors, and they were able to survive and reproduce and lead to us, whereas the people that weren't good at listening to stories wandered off and got eaten. Or
they got killed.
Devoured. Yeah.
So what you're saying, it's in our DNA
it's built right into
to enjoy stories, because the people that listened to the stories survived and the stories continued. Those that didn't listen to the stories got eaten by the saber-toothed tiger.
Their genes weren't passed on.
Their genes weren't passed on. Thank God their genes weren't passed on. So that's why we love stories.
It is. It's genetically built into us. Now we're all like everything else. Some of us are better storytellers than others, and some of us are better at listening to stories. But I gave a demonstration at an event recently where I think I packed something like 52 facts into a story. And then at the end of the event, people were able in the audience to recall about 48 of them. And that was a story that I had told half an hour or 45 minutes before, with these very mundane facts, seemingly mundane facts in it. But because I wove them into an exciting, interesting story that engaged the brain, they were able to remember them.
Yeah. What color was the cup? Red.
Exactly.
See, and you told that story first time I heard it 5 years ago, and I saw the color of the cup, and I still remember the barn, and I still remember the fire, because that was a really, really good story that you wove in to the points that you were making at that time.
Mm-hmm. But it causes people to remember things at an amazing level. It's also a good trick, party trick, if you want to.
So podiatrists could use this with their patients in the clinic. Yes. So I'm going to tell you 3 things you need to do. 1, 2, story, 3.
Yeah. And if you then tell in the story, you tell about somebody, I like contrast too, so I'll tell the story. I might actually give all 3 of them there. Here are the 3 things. By the way, that reminds me, my patient, I can't tell you their name, of course, because I protect all of my patient's identity and medical information. Ooh, good. That just built trust. But I told them these 3 points, and they did each one of them in this way. And you tell the engaging story, somebody that repeated back to you that had a good recovery, that they followed your instructions. And you say, contrast that with, again, I can't tell you his name, but let's call him Floyd. And Floyd did everything wrong and played soccer. It was a fiasco, and he crashed his car, and he was drinking heavily and fell down the stairs. And, they'll remember those 3 points because you told them to them, but then drove them home in that story. And you did one better, you went one deeper. You told the story of somebody who did it and had this amazing outcome, as well as somebody who was just a disaster and didn't follow any of them. So you had the chance to repeat the 3 things 3 times. The 3 times when you told them, the 3 times in the successful story, and the 3 times in the disastrous story.
And it's funny. And I think that's the difference between when you said some people are naturally good storytellers, and they use examples of patients, but I think adding, just not embellishing the story, but making the story more interesting to the patient instead of just giving them the facts, actually turn it into a bit of a story. Well, will definitely make the patient remember it more.
Absolutely. I had a very bad spinal cord injury. And I would use stories all the time because I had to be hospitalized. So I was paralyzed actually from the neck down, and it was a long recovery. But ultimately, when I had the surgery to remove all the material that had harmed my spinal cord, and then to bolt the C4, 5, and 5, 6 vertebrae together, I told the doctor that I was not going to use any narcotic pain medication post-operatively. And he said, "Oh, I assure you, you will. You'll use the pain medication." And then he got the first taste of my storytelling ability when he came into the recovery room to see, could I move my legs? He wanted to know, if this was going to be a disaster or if we were on the road to a success. And my wife was in the recovery room. And he said to the nurse, "What is Robin doing here? She's not supposed to be in here." And the nurse said, "Oh, David woke up and said it was okay." And so he goes, "The man is under the influence of anesthesia. You don't listen to him." And then it just went on and on. And I did not use any post-operative pain medication. And then that same day, convinced a nurse to help me get dressed in my clothes because I didn't have the dexterity in my hands yet to do it. And then I convinced her to walk with me to the nurse's station. And we met a doctor there who was looking at my chart. And the nurse said to him, "Oh, doctor, this is Dave Fries." And he turned, he misunderstood what was going on. He saw me and he said, "Oh, your brother is going to make a very full recovery. We think he's doing pretty well. And I said, no, doc, that's me. And he looked like he was stunned. He had no expectation that I'd be dressed in clothing. And then he was a neurologist, so he put me through all these tests. And I said to him, you're not giving me a lot of confidence that you really knew what you were doing. You seem very surprised by the fact that I'm out here. But good storytelling can get you a long way.
So would you say also that outcome for you, because you went into the whole, you had there was a neck injury, and it was from jiu-jitsu, from what I can remember.
Mm-hmm.
So you had that injury. Would you say having a positive mindset when you had the injury, and you had a positive mindset prior to the surgery, and as soon as you came out of the surgery, that having that positive thinking helped you a long way than sitting there going, oh, why is me? Why did this happen to me? This is so unfair.
Yeah,
it definitely would help.
No question about it. So you're giving me a lead in back to just briefly telling what each of these levels of force multiplier mean. And mindset is one of the first ones. The meta level force multiplier is, how do we keep our energy up? How do we keep our spirits up? How do we think about things so that we make good decisions about the strategies that we're going to use? So this is the highest level of force multiplication, but one of the greatest ones. Everybody wants to skip to the end, to the tactical ones. What are the little verbal tricks you use? How did you get that nurse to, let you put your clothes on and walk around when you should have? How did you get out of the hospital that day and stay overnight at the doctor's house when you should have been in the hospital for 3 more days? How did you accomplish all those things, the little tricks? That's what everybody wants. But to your point, Tyson, the meta level force multipliers, which are ways that we can be more of who we really are, and a more powerful version of who we really are, and keep a more positive mindset that lets us think about strategy and tactics in better ways. That's the highest level of force multiplication. And then the strategic force multipliers are those proven concepts and ideas that help to guide us in the tactics. So the strategic force multipliers might be things like developing systems. If we develop systems for all the tactical things, they become easier, and it becomes easier to reproduce. So for example, a tactical thing might be, we're going to do a particular type of advertising of our podiatry practice to get this particular kind of patient. That's the particular kind of work we really like. So if we're going to spend any money on advertising or spend any money on triggering referrals, why don't we do it for the right kind of patients rather than the wrong kind of patients? So that's tactical. Strategy is, how do we build a system to do that, where we test an ad and see if it worked. And if it did, we do more of that. Or we test giving out a card to people where they can refer a friend at a discounted price for the first consultation, whatever it might be, whatever particular ethics allow. But if we just do a one-off of that particular type of marketing, it's bound to be less effective than if we have a system for doing it, hypothesizing what's going to work, testing it, and then doing more of what really works, so that when we're really spending money on marketing and advertising or referral plans or email, whatever it might be, we're doing the thing that we know works to get the right patient for the right kind of procedure that we really like doing, that our team's built to do in their sleep. And
but at that meta level that you're talking about, if you're very negative, or you've got things going on in your life that are not making you feel good, when you're trying to come up with a strategy or trying to think about tactics, would massively influence that. Whereas if you've got a really positive mindset and things are going great in your life, then you're going to think about your strategy and tactics completely differently.
Sure. So an example of this might be that at the meta level, we want to train ourselves to be more resilient, so that when something negative happens, we're able to, which it does. Negative things happen to us all the time, every day in practice at a micro level, and frequently in life at a bigger level, and occasionally in life something catastrophic happens. But if we have trained ourselves to be more resilient, and then people go like, okay, it's easy to say be more resilient, but how do we do that? Well, there are some strategies and tactics that are proven, again, that we learn from all of the special forces operators, spies. Like when I was trained as an interrogator, you were often counter-trained in other techniques. It built your resiliency, because if you happen to be at a forward operating base that was overrun, and the bad guys put you in a little box or waterboarded you, you were way more likely to be resilient to that if you knew it. There's a little technique.
Oh, you have been waterboarded too, haven't you?
I have. It's a little known detail, but yes, I have been. And I must say it's unpleasant.
Yeah, I've heard you describe it. It doesn't look like fun.
No, it's not fun. Although, again, compared to like having little bits of your body lobbed off or some other things, people ask, is it torture? Well, it can have like some long-term effects. So, it's not a party.
Yeah.
But I'd rather have that than, electrical wires attached to some sensitive part of my body. So.
Oh yeah, and every day of the week. Yep, that'll be fine. So sorry for interrupting. You're talking from experience.
There's also a technique of resiliency that's taught in a program, the name of which we will not mention here. But this is going to sound silly, and it's going to sound like it came from, the therapist that you go to once or twice a month. I don't know how often people go to therapists, but maybe daily. I know people that should at any rate. But naming, when something is going wrong, naming the emotion that you're feeling is very powerful at disempowering the emotion. So if you're feeling fear, you say, that's fear. It's a little bit of rage. I'm starting to feel rage. What's amazing is that by labeling it, this is a force multiplier. It's kind of a tactical force multiplier, but it's leading to the high level metaforce multiplier of being more resilient. Because there's two things. We want to learn to achieve, but we also want, when things drop off, when there's a problem, to halt the drop off. Because we all know people who've achieved, and then they screw their lives up and they go into free fall and they never could seem to stop it. And now maybe they build back, maybe they don't. But my point is, if we can learn the techniques that let us stop the free fall so that we're building again from a much shorter drop off, we can continue to succeed at higher and higher and higher levels. We can continue to be more resilient if we just learn these little tools. So that's what force multiplication is about at all three levels. At the meta level, and I'm happy to identify some of these.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so at the mental level, the meta level, which is the mindset stuff, we're looking for ways to stay strong and to recover from damage or a downturn of performance or something like that. And I've been through lots of these kinds of things, as we all have as human beings. But part of the reason that I'm so relatively happy with my status in life and still continue to achieve things that other people, like, I don't think of myself as achieving amazing things, but other people tell me that these things I've achieved are amazing things. So I'll take them at their word. I'll take the pat on the back. So at the very highest level, people try to cultivate in themselves the ability to be more creative or iterative. Because if we can come up with creative solutions to problems, and lots of them, we're way less afraid of problems. They just don't worry us as much or bother us as much. But creative people realize that just thinking of solutions is not the whole solution. You have to be able to implement too. So really high level thinkers that are working on meta level force multiplication are looking for ways to be able to either implement themselves or to be super effective at delegation, so that they are able to not only create things, but then get things done. They also really work on becoming masterful in the areas of enhanced communication, persuasion, and influence. And I can make that distinction between persuasion and influence, because no one person is as powerful as a team of people that are dedicated to this, to a clear vision. And so great leaders who are working on meta level force multipliers find the best way to become a better leader, to become a better negotiator, to become a better persuader, to become more influential, is to just become better at understanding how human beings communicate and how they make decisions. And sometimes when I'm teaching these things, and it doesn't happen on a podcast because nobody can shout this out in the audience, but at this point, when I'm talking about these things, somebody will go, well, that sounds horribly manipulative. And of course it is, because I'm fond of saying, like, all human communication is manipulation, all of it. You tell a joke, you're trying to manipulate the other person into laughing. You teach, you're trying to manipulate the person into becoming a better, more thoughtful, more well-informed person. You yell at somebody, you're trying to intimidate them and manipulate them into a sense of intimidation.
So you're saying most conversations, nearly all conversations we have, there's some form of manipulation in there. So even if you're telling a story like you are now, you're manipulating the listener by keeping them interested in the story and having them not walk away, which is what happens to some people when they go to a networking event and they wonder why they talk to people for like 30 seconds and the person looks at watch and goes, oh, it's at the time. I had to leave early. Oh, hang on, there's Mike over there. I'm just going to go and see Mike for a second. I will return. I promise I will return, which is them saying you're boring as batshit and you have not manipulated me in any way. I wanted to be manipulated.
Yes. And so you're, again, circling around my point, which is that, yes, if all human communication is manipulation, which I don't think you disagree with me on that, then what matters? And it's your intention.
Yeah.
Do you have a positive intent behind it, like to keep them engaged in the story so that they feel better or have a good time or whatever it might be? And our intention should not just be our own, but it should be informed by what the other person needs. So, for example, if we have a product to sell, we should become really good at listening at a deep and profound level and triggering people to give us more information. We should be good at that so that we can be quite certain and honest with ourselves that the product we have is either a good match for them or not. Yeah. And if it is, and we've really done a good job of listening, then we're sort of ineffective and useless if we don't try to do the best that we can do to use those other communication skills to show them the advantages. Because people sometimes need to be shown the advantages, and sometimes we need to trigger their buying strategy to get them to buy. And it's what they need. They are reluctant to part with what they already have. That's another thing in humans. Once we get something, like a rock that had a sharp edge on it, we don't want, if we're hiking around, to let that rock go. We'll do everything we can. If we are using that rock as an axe and to grind food and to kill a game, we want to keep that rock. Maybe a knife would be a better tool, but we want to keep that rock. That's built into us. So understanding how to overcome that resistance is a very powerful tool. Can I leap to two tactical examples?
Oh, definitely. Oh, before you go to the two tactics or the two tactical examples, just what you said about the intent, I think is really important to highlight. That is because, and when you said, if you listen, really, really listen to the patient, then when you can say, yes, my product or say for an example, the orthotic that you want to design is perfect for that patient. So when you're then communicating, you're communicating with the right intent. Yes. However, if that patient tells you everything and you're going, my orthotic is not really the best solution, but I want the money and I need the money. Therefore, that intent is wrong.
Yes.
You're trying to influence.
And so if you use manipulative techniques, you could get them to buy the orthotic, but it's not going to give them the result. So one of the things I would do in that situation is say, I was listening very carefully to you. And I initially thought that this orthotic that I would do would solve the problem. But because you said this, this, and this, I'm not sure that it is. Now, this gives people a chance to say, well, when I was saying that, I didn't mean that, I meant this. So, you know, because people are imprecise. Yeah. But they may confirm for you. But here's the other thing that will have gone on. In their mind, they realize they now can trust you because you just revealed that you weren't dealing from the position of your own self-interest, that you're listening very carefully to them, and you are not going to sell them something that's not the right thing for them. So that's put you in a very powerful position of not just being persuasive, but influential to them. So if I can make a distinction, and I haven't forgotten the other two techniques about like getting more of this information, so you're a great listener. But if you reveal this to them and you've built that level of trust, and you've triggered that level of trust in them because they now know that you could have sold them the orthotic, but you're not going to, then the next step is to say, so if that isn't for you, and remember, they might go back and say, oh, when I said these three things, I didn't mean that, I meant this. And the orthotic may be appropriate. It's just that people are very imprecise with their speech. So cycling back like that is not a bad idea. But if you then say, okay, well, we have this laser or we have this, and based on these things you're telling me, that's a little bit more expensive than the orthotic, but it may get you a better result. You can't just do the laser treatment one time. You've got to, generally speaking, it's efficacious. It works if you do it 4 to 6 times. But they're much more likely to want to do something because you have listened to them, you've demonstrated that, you've shown them overtly that you're interested in their well-being. So one little distinction there. Persuasion, hard. You've got to get somebody who's thinking one way to think another way. No matter how skilled we are at it, it's still work. It can be done, and some people are better at it than others. Hard. But if you repeatedly persuade people and then they take the solution you're offering, you build them an orthotic, it really works. You suggest that they get a second one for their sneakers as well as for their dress shoes. They find that super convenient. Over and over again, when you persuade them or guide them, they get the result that they want. You become influential, meaning when they have a question about their health, their podiatric health, or maybe even their broader general health issues, they're going to turn to you because you have repeatedly shown them that you listen to them and give them a result that they really want. And being influential in the long game is where you want to be, because that's where people really trust you. They seek you out. They're going to do what you tell them to do because you've proven that you're interested in them. Does that make sense, Tyson?
It makes perfect sense. It's even with this particular podcast, the feedback I get from people where they are being influenced by this podcast. Mm-hmm. And they're coming back and they're listening to it again and again because the information from the guests is so good and has been helping them in so many areas that every time an episode drops that they want to listen to it, or they've just found out about the podcast and now they're binging on it because they want to catch up because they know that what they hear has a positive outcome and therefore they come back to it.
So you're no longer persuading them to listen to your podcast. You've become influential. So they come to your podcast expecting to hear high quality information. Here's another nice thing about that. When you build that level of influence and trust, if you make a mistake, which we all do, you say something they don't like, or the particular guy.
I do that all the time.
Yep. I know.
you know me.
The two of us do it, right?
How many inappropriate things have I said in Arizona?
Well, it's why you're there.
It's why I get invited back. Yeah.
It's your mission. But when we are influential and when we are highly trusted, when we do make the rare mistake, people will forgive that because they go, oh, that's just Tyson. He's being funny. But they know that the payoff of listening to the Tyson podcast, even if one episode wasn't their cup of tea, is so strong that they're coming back time and time and time again. So building that level of influence and trust is a powerful tool. One of the ways to do that is at the meta level. Really, powerful, influential people have trained themselves to have a higher level of acuity and to be able to listen better to people. Acuity meaning they notice little signals in how people are behaving, the tone of voice, the speed at which they're speaking, the gestures they're making, all of those kinds of things. But a very powerful tool to get deeper into this information. I'll tell a story that will teach this very simple technique, but every one of your doctors that's listening is going to explode their performance and probably profitability if they do what I'm about to say well. So I don't go to the doctor very often, but I go regularly just to make sure nothing's going haywire, meaning, once every 24 months or so.
Yeah.
And for those of you who could see me, you'll see the gray hair. I'm an old codger. So I went to the doctor, and this is a new doc. And so he says to me, tell me why you're here. And I give him the 3-minute version of why I'm there. And by the way, he's announced even before he does this, that he's going to spend as much time as we need to with me in order to get all the information that he needs in order to be able to help me get to my goals and my outcomes. So right off the bat, he's established a lot of credibility with me. He asked me the question, why are you here? I give him a maybe 4 or 5 sentence long answer. And he goes, that sounds good. What else? So I recognize this technique right away because this is what I do. And I go, guy's pretty smart. Well, he doesn't say what else. But even though I recognize it, I want to comply. And by the way, he doesn't leap in. He just leaves the dead space there. Yeah, sure, Dave. What else? all right, guy's playing me, but I'm going to indulge him. So now I give him a little deeper answer about why I'm there. He goes, and? So far he said, what else? And. Now I'm the third level deep. I'm now articulating reasons for this guy that I wasn't even consciously aware of. So he's gotten way more information out of me. This comes from my old interrogator days.
Yeah.
And I'm happily providing it, and I'm getting insight into myself. And he doesn't stop at 3. He goes, all of that sounds right to me. I'm just curious. So he's not going to judge me, because now we're getting into the nitty-gritty here. He goes, I'm just curious, are there any other reasons that you came? Are there any other outcomes that you want out of this? Now, think about this with your own patience when you're listening. It took a few minutes, and the depth to which he took me, the insights he gives me, the attentiveness he's paying to what I want out of this relationship with him. 4 or 5 years later, here I am, still going to see this guy. And by the way, it costs a massive premium to see this guy.
Yeah.
It's not covered by the health insurance. So that was the result of that first conversation. So weirdly, saying yes with a questioning inflection and what else? Is there anything else that you feel like you should tell me? Any other outcomes you want to make sure that we achieve for you? Simple technique that if you got nothing else from Tyson's podcast with me today, that could transform your relationships, certainly, because if you're able to do this with your partner or your spouse or your kids or your friends, if you're able to get them to realize that you're listening to them in a profoundly deeper, better way, and that you have genuine interest in them, getting them, by the way, to tell stories works the same way. Like they're going to tell you information in those stories. They're not going to reveal any other way.
Well, you did this with me the first time I went to Arizona, and you said, we need a volunteer. I'm only in the room for 15 minutes. I'm thinking, well, I've come all the way from Australia. I'm not going to sit in the back and be quiet. So I put my hand up, I'll volunteer. So you and Dave Wyman, Dave Wyman has also been on this podcast twice. You had me at the front and you were asking me questions about my goals, what it was that I wanted to achieve. Why was I there? Why was I at the event? And I told you. And then you went, what else? And I told you that. And you went, and we started going deeper, and we went deeper and deeper until I actually got really, really upset.
You did.
And I sat down for about 60 seconds and I got up and I had to leave the room because you had really gone down really deep and touched something appropriately, not inappropriately.
Yes.
But you touched something that I had not thought about in relation to my dad passing away and why I was driven the way that I was driven, my goals and what I wanted to achieve. And I'd sort of lost sight of that. And when you dug down, instead of me just saying, oh, I'm here for this reason, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It really just opened up my mind. So I think I always look at that I took that in when I got back to how I spoke with my patients. Because if they told me they had heel pain, that wasn't the real reason they were there.
That's right.
When you went, what else? And all of a sudden you found out that their parent had passed away early from a heart attack and they were putting on weight. They were scared of dying. It wasn't the heel pain. They were scared of dying, although they couldn't walk their dog. There was a lot more to it.
Well, when you link those deep emotions to the treatment of the heel pain, they're way more likely to do what they need to do to fix the heel pain. And they've bonded with you at a deep, deep level that creates healing in its own way.
Well, because when you were talking to them after that, you weren't talking about the heel pain. You were talking about their parent or why they wanted to stay healthy. And you talk about heart disease. So the heel pain was just a symptom that they had right now, not what their underlying driver was or why they came into your podiatry clinic.
A related little tactical, we're on some of the tactical things now, but a related tactical tool is to say, how would your life be better if? So if you say to somebody, why are you here? Tell me why you're here. And they say it's the heel pain. And you go a little bit deeper, and then say, okay, if you were able to get rid of the heel pain, how would your life be better? Well, I'd finally be able to lose some weight. And if you were able to lose that weight, how would your life be even better yet? And they'll go, well, I'd be able to go play golf with my friends again. And if you were playing golf with your friends, how would your life be better? This sounds silly out of context, but in context, it really helps people to relate all of these other things they want in life and as a human being to the outcome of what it is that you're helping them with. And whether or not they get the exact outcome they were hoping for from the particular treatment is not going to be nearly as important to them as you thoughtfully, in a caring way, helped them to start that path to recovery from wherever they were toward whatever it is that they really wanted to achieve. And people will remember that, and they'll work harder on themselves.
It definitely, like you said, you've done it to me, and the outcome from that was fantastic. So that's why I had no problems using those techniques when I was talking with patients, because I knew the outcome was going to be better. The treatment was going to be, it was just everything about it was going to be a far better outcome by just asking a few more questions and not saying so superficial. So we better keep going. I better keep you on track.
Well, let me.
I know I don't have to. I know I don't have to, because I've seen you speak in cans for 8 hours straight. Oh, there were coffee breaks in between without one note. So when it comes to this stuff, I don't know anyone that knows it as well as what you do and just naturally can deliver it. So I'll just let you loose now.
Well, I'll just say that sometimes at this point, people will be saying to themselves, or sometimes later to me, oh, well, this is easy for you. You've done it your whole life. You had this exceptional training when you were young, but it wasn't easy for me. It was very hard for me. I was an angry little fat kid who I was very intelligent, but it was a bad combo because I was intelligent, angry, and fat. So things like this would happen. I'd meet the new teacher in 4th grade, and I would talk to her or him for a minute or two, and then they'd go, really? They're sending you to teach me? Really? I think that's going to work out. So I'm just saying that I was inept with people. I was socially awkward. I struggled to carry on meaningful conversations with people. I grew up, my parents were kids when they had me. They did the best job they possibly could, and they were amazing, amazing, amazing people. But when kids have kids, there's all kinds of turmoil going on.
Yeah.
So I don't want people to feel that this is beyond their reach or hard to learn. We're touching the tip of the iceberg here because we're going to talk for 45 minutes or an hour, however long you'll let me go on without stopping me. But we've already packed a lot in. There's already been a lot in the stories. There are a couple of examples. If you go back and listen to this podcast a second time, you will already have 2 or 3 very simple techniques that could be, there's probably 10 in here already, but you could pick 2 or 3 that could be transformational of how you interact with people. And if you just practice those, they feel clunky at first because they're awkward, because you're saying you're waiting for somebody to stop talking, and then you're going to say, and then you're waiting for them to stop talking, but you're really supposed to be listening to them in between. But eventually they go from feeling clunky to feeling very natural. And eventually you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 examples of where it worked so well that you just use it over and over again. By the way, one of the meta level force multipliers is that people who are really great at this and who really build a collection of force multipliers at all of these different levels, they cultivate flexibility in themselves. This was hard for me too, because I'm not by nature a very flexible person. But the more tools I started having in the toolbox, and the better I got at 2 or 3 or 4 of them, the less I worried. In other words, if I trotted one out and it didn't work, I went from saying, okay, not an absolute, okay, that doesn't work. I went from that to saying, that didn't work this time. And then as I got better at this, I went, that didn't work this time with this person on this issue. So that you begin to realize that a technique or a tool, especially at the tactical level, doesn't work every time with everybody, because a lot of what we're talking about and that we're teaching today, Tyson, is at the biological level. It does work pretty often, but there's always an exception to the rule. But if you are working on yourself, on becoming more flexible and catching yourself, so instead of going from noticing that the thing didn't work, you say, okay, that didn't work that well, or it didn't work this time, or it didn't work with this person, or it didn't work on this issue. Your brain starts to go like, okay, that's not the end of the world. I've got others, and I can try other ways of breaking through with this person. So if we get to the end of, if we ask them to describe a problem or why they're there, and we say, what else? And they don't answer, then if we're not flexible, we just shut down. We go, okay, that didn't work. I'm never going to ask that question again. But if instead we say, well, you know what I mean. Is there anything else? Are there any other reasons that you could think of? Maybe that weren't apparent at first, but that are other things you're concerned about. I want to make sure that I do the best job I can for you. So let's go a little bit deeper. Then they might answer. So having a few tools in the toolbox helps, but cultivating at the meta force multiplier level, being more flexible. One of the other sort of strategic tools that I've taught people is that there is a space between the stimulus and the response. For most of us, something happens that makes us angry, and we get angry over and over again. For example, if I were putting dishes in the dishwasher, my mother used to reorganize them. That to me was saying like, screw, you're doing a crappy job. I do it this way. So it made me mad. Weirdly, that developed a habit in me that when things triggered that anger, I would just become angry, like there was no gap. But then I became intellectually aware, wait a second, there's a stimulus and then there's a response, but there's a little gap in between them. So have you ever had this, or anybody listening ever had this, Tyson, where you're getting madder and madder and madder, and now you're going to say something, and the rational part of your brain goes, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. You're too mad, and you just say it. Yeah. That's happened before,
oh yeah, that's happened probably once or twice.
Just before we started the podcast.
In the last 24 hours, probably. Yes.
So what that is we've gone too far, right? We've become so angry that we can't stop ourselves anymore. So the cool little trick is this labeling thing I was talking about before. That's anger. Ooh, I feel the earliest stirrings of anger. That's amusing. Now, here's the thing is, it's given you some room, and the anger hasn't run away with you and made you a stupid, person that's blurting out things you shouldn't. You've given yourself a little bit of a breather, and literally taking a breath there can be helpful too. And now you're more resourceful because you're not in deep anger. You've taken advantage of that gap between the stimulus, your mom moving the dishes in the dishwasher, and the response, which is to shout things at your mom you shouldn't shout. And she was a tiny fireball, so you had to run very fast. And also my dad, when he would get home, would often say something like this: don't make me put this size 12 shoe, which is quite a large shoe in America, up your ass. That was a famous thing that when my mom got finished telling him what we had done. So my point is cultivating this gap between stimulus and response, and learning to identify emotions you're starting to feel before they run away with you is
It's just why some people get themselves in trouble when their comment will always be, oh, I have a short fuse. That something happened and they just explode. It's because they never get that rational between the emotion, thinking about, oh, I'm angry. Some guys just spilt my drink. So therefore, I'm going to hold him on the ground and elbow him 25 times in the head, get arrested again.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go to the slammer, as we call it in America. Yeah.
We've got this guy I know in Cairns here, and we were at Muay Thai fights. Hadn't seen him for ages. And he came up to us and we were chatting. He said, Brad, I won't say his name. Almost said it. And so he comes up to us. We said, oh, where you been? He says, oh, I was in jail again. Yeah. Oh, okay, what happened? Oh, yeah, something happened. I have a short fuse and I beat the shit out of this bloke. And then he said to us, and this was funny, when you get to prison that first night that you're there, and I looked at the other guy looked at me, and we went, no, we don't actually know what that's like. The first night in prison. Anyway, he walks off, and I said to the other guy that was with me, I went, well, that was unusual. He talks to us like we've all been to prison before, but we haven't. And
well, to be fair, I'd always assumed you had been to prison.
Yeah. It's a given thing when you meet me, isn't it? But he is the person, super nice guy. And if I was ever in trouble, if he was on the other side of the room, ever saw me in trouble, be the first person there to protect you without thinking of the consequences to himself. that he's probably going to go back in jail for helping me. But that's where there is no line between the stimulus and the response. He doesn't think in between.
Now, there are people that have like frontal lobe problems or they've had injuries, which means that it's very nearly impossible for them to recognize the gap.
Yeah.
But that's not most people. Most of us can cultivate a short fuse by repeatedly practicing going from mental stimulation to anger. We could practice it over and over and over again until we could say to people legitimately, yes, I have a short fuse. I made it myself. Yeah. But the reverse is true too.
Oh, true. I give it a trim every now and then.
Yeah, exactly. If it's not short enough, I cut it down.
Yeah.
But the reverse is true. We could pull that little short fuse out and we could put a bigger fuse in. And there are techniques that allow us to do that. And people might be saying like, well, what does that have to do with communication? Everything. Because if we can cultivate that place where when somebody says something, we don't go right to anger, or we have no idea what their experience is, why they might have said that. And so allowing ourselves and cultivating ourselves the ability to say, well, that's interesting. I would not have thought that. Tell me more about why you feel that way. I'm not saying that they're going to change your mind or that you won't ultimately get angry. But if you cultivate the ability to go a little bit deeper without going right to anger or to frustration or to confusion. Yeah. So I used to, when I was confused by something, because I like to learn things, I like to learn them quickly. And if I don't, and I was experiencing confusion, it used to lead me to frustration. But I kept rehearsing going from confusion and saying when I feel confusion, stop. That means you're taking 2, 3, 4 new things that you've never put together in this way before. And confusion is signaling you're about to make a breakthrough in your thinking. You're about to make a profound learning. So just by interrupting the old pattern of confusion leads to frustration, I was able to go to confusion leads to anticipation of new learning. Think about how much better that mindset is to actually getting the learning that you want. Oh,
definitely. So even when people get easily offended, would be the same thing. There's a stimulus. Oh, I'm offended. And straight away they go into attack mode because they are offended over something that you'll sit there sometimes and go, I have no idea why you're even offended. So a few years ago, a number of years ago, we had a Bob Marley party. Oh, we had a Jamaican party. So I went as Bob Marley. So when I went as Bob Marley, I put a little bit of powder on my face to sort of darken myself up just a fraction because I'm Bob Marley. I thought Bob Marley is awesome. We made a fake joint. I had the dreadlocks. That picture was posted on Facebook, and all of a sudden I had a whole pile of middle-aged American white women attacking me for blackfacing and being a racist. And I went, what the? And they were like super, super angry. So, and all of a sudden, what sparked that off in their head? And where it was posted, I said, oh, better take it down. These people are all upset. But what was the stimulus? Like they see one photo and straight away they jump into conclusions that, I'm a dentist that just killed a lion and posted it on Facebook.
Yeah. And I mean, there's all kinds of things at play there, as well as like a cultural disconnect. Like you would not necessarily know as Australian what that could trigger in Americans.
Oh, yeah. I know.
Like grappling with the issues of like, the slave trade and all of those sorts of things. So that was a supercharged issue probably at the time you were posting it, about which you had no idea. But my point is that the world would be a better place if we were on both sides of that able to pause and you say, well, I've obviously touched a nerve, don't know what that is, but I'm not going to provoke it anymore. And they said, hey, well, this is an Australian. Maybe he doesn't understand even why we're upset. In other words, if we could open those those channels of communication and be a tiny bit more patient with one another, you'll notice one of the things I said earlier is, I'm just curious or I'm wondering. That's the specific antidote to this. So people are so used to being viciously judged by one another now in very recent times that I preface sometimes my remarks by saying, oh, I'm just curious or wondering, which is takes the pressure, the likelihood that I'm going to judge them down a notch. So I'm more likely to get an honest answer. In fact, for people watching, I'll describe it for people that are just listening. I will often say, as we meet in a conference room where we're going to have a negotiation, I'll go, hey, before we even get started. And what I'm doing is I'm taking my hands and moving them down.
Yeah.
So I'm announcing we haven't started yet, and I'm pushing down the barriers. And people will very frequently say things because their brain has gone like, it's okay, we haven't even started yet, which sounds absurd, but try it sometime. It works really well. And notice I change my voice too. If you're listening and watching, I go, hey, before we even get started, I just have a couple of quick questions. I heard that you were into fishing and that you were away on a fishing trip last week. Is that true? Now, I've said before we just get started, I've lowered my voice and I've pushed down the barrier between us.
Yeah.
Sounds very simple, very powerful metaphorically.
So moving on to the meta level and the strategic and tactical level, because I'm just looking at how long we've been talking.
Yes.
And I don't want anyone to get to the end of this and sort of go, bloody hell, he missed something. So
right.
I'll get you get those final points in. Yes. Sure.
We've been weaving them in and out.
Yeah. I know.
But let me just give you an example of a business strategic force multiplier. So I alluded to it earlier. I said building systems. So whatever might be useful at the tactical level. By the way, the tactical level are the things we do day in and day out to take our ideas and to make them, to transform them from an electrochemical reaction in our head to a reality on the ground. So in marketing, a particular type of advertising or a direct mail letter or a landing page on a website or an email sequence, these could all be tactics that you would use in marketing your podiatry practice, right? So those are things we're doing there. The strategies are what guide them. So for example, a high-level strategy would be stop doing the things that aren't working, identify the things that are working and do more of those.
That's so funny.
Right, it sounds like, I'm just thinking at this point, anybody that's tuned in will be like, I'm going to shut it off now because that's obvious. But it's one of those things where we say it's obvious, but we do not do it. We are constantly continuing to do things that didn't work very well. Another strategic sort of tool is optimization. So for example, if we've got something and it's working, maybe we should test something else to see if it's working. So a very interesting story about this in the world of direct marketing and advertising, direct response advertising, was, I believe it was in the 40s or 50s in the United States. There was an ad, and it was the control for this company that said, put music back into your life. And the ad was for a course where you could learn to play the piano. And the company had tested many different ads and had found that this one was the one that worked the best to get people who bought and didn't ask for refunds and would sometimes buy multiple products. So notice, buried in that story is something important. Try to make your advertising and marketing and networking get you the right kind of patients. Because I can tell you, I've worked with podiatrists and doctors and dentists all over the world who are spending hard-earned time, money, energy, advertising, marketing, and networking for the wrong kinds of patients, who then when those patients come in, they complain about them and they're not profitable and they don't have the right insurance or whatever it might be. Well, that's sort of your fault if you haven't thought out, who do I really like working on? What kind of procedures? What sort of tools do I like to provide to them? And which of those are the most lucrative from a margin standpoint for me? And now I could start, once I know who that is, I can start advertising in a way that's more likely to attract them. So, optimizing and doing something better and testing it against your control. So this company, the piano music course company, decided to advertise in a new magazine. And this was back in the day of typesetters, and they made a mistake. So the headline simply said, puts music back in your life. So one letter changed. And I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe the response rate for that ad versus all the other magazines that just said put was something like 30 or 40% higher response rate.
Yeah.
My explanation for that is put music back into your life means you're going to do something about putting it back in your life, where puts music back into your life means the course sort of does it for you. That's how I think that the brain was interpreting that little change. But the point of the story is we should be constantly exploring what's working, doing more of that and less of what's not. And then of what's working, we should be hypothesizing why it's working and seeing if we can make it better and work way better. And so there are plenty of examples. There's a book by the chairman of Ogilvy, which is a world famous advertising agency, called Alchemy. And it just gives example after example after example of one little tweak in an email, one little tweak on a landing page, one little tweak in a headline, one little tweak in blog copy, one little change in a script at a call center resulted in gigantic multiples of sales and or some other positive result in business. So force multipliers are designed to help us to find those. And the 3 levels of force multiplier is a framework of force multiplication. How do we think better? And how do we guide our strategic choices? Then the strategies, which are things we've been talking about, like building systems. So if we say training is a major strategic force multiplier, building a system around training where we find a really good trainer in our organization so we don't have to do it. And then we record their trainings so that people could just access them online. And then we sell those trainings to other podiatrist practice, whatever, it could go on and on. But being strategically minded guides how we then deploy the particular tactics. And one of my favorite strategic to tactical force multipliers is to get clarity about our purpose, our value, our mission, and the exact kind of patient that we want, because then we could use a second force multiplier, which is alignment. So when we go to do a tactic, we go to do advertising, we go to hire a new employee, we go to develop a training program for them, we could say, is this thing we're about to do in alignment with and going to advance our purpose, our values, our mission, and is it going to be loved by and will it help to support the avatar of our best patient, or is it not in alignment? We now have a new litmus test that lets us do more of what's going to work and less of what's not going to work.
How simple is that, though? Do more of what works and less of what doesn't work. But like you said, a lot of people never stop to actually look at all the marketing and the activities they're doing to actually think, this isn't working. It's like when you said, like a force multiplier, having the right teacher, having the right coach is a force multiplier. Like I know every person I've ever worked with one-on-one, their podiatry business has grown. And as the years have gone on and my experience as a coach got better, the people I work with now, their business grows even faster. So having a coach work with me, somebody else, or attending training programs, like I go to Arizona every year for that reason, because with what I learn is a force multiplier with what I want to do next. So if people are sitting in their business and they're thinking, stop doing what doesn't work and do more of what does work, well, maybe getting help is that answer, and doing everything yourself might not be the answer.
Well, that's a perfect high-level strategy. Let me give you another quick example. And I know I'm keeping your folks too long here, but if you really know who your avatar is, then it's going to help you simplify where you put the content or the advertising and what it's going to say. So if you looked at who your best patients are, who buy multiple orthotics and who get great results and who refer other patients to you, and you looked at who they were, and you could say, well, gee, they're predominantly men in their 50s who want some kind of relief so they could continue playing golf or whatever it is. I'm making this up. But if you found that, then you're not going to advertise to them on TikTok, but there might be another demographic that would respond to email, but one demographic that would be much more responsive to getting a letter in the mail. So having clarity and at the high level, seeking to align the tactics with what you're trying to do is very, very powerful. It could dictate, do I send an email? Do I send a letter? do I advertise? If I'm going to advertise, where am I putting that advertising? Is it a magazine? Is it on radio? It helps to clarify all of those things.
Yeah.
And then at the tactical level, so we've got the meta level or mindset, the strategic, these are rules that are proven, models, if you will, to guide us. One more before we go to the tactical, just as a final wrap up, the OODA loop. OODA loop was developed by Air Force Colonel Boyd. It stands for observe, orient, decide, act. It sounds deceptively simple. There's a lot to it, but the idea is you look at what's going on in your market and your practice. You determine what options are available. What are the things you could do? You could decide on one and then take the action. But it's called the OODA loop because we go back and look to see periodically, did that work? Is it still working? Could we make it work better?
Yeah, and it's constantly gathering information, new information, and you can only make a decision on the information you've got.
Exactly. But it helps us to have more information.
Well, I learned the OODA loop from you, and I use the OODA loop multiple times throughout the 12-week podiatry business reboot. It's one of the things it's one of the things we talk about. I think it was week 5 that we talk about it.
It's just so powerful. It's powerful as an information gathering tool. And I guess what may be lost in this quick explanation of it is that when Colonel Boyd was teaching fighter pilots to fight, American fighter pilots to fight against a then superior MiG, what he was saying is when you decide and take that action, it's changed the battle space. The other pilot has to now adjust or fly somewhere else, and the battle space has changed. So if you, as the American pilot, can adjust to that and reorient quickly and decide what to do next, if you're better and more proficient at performing the OODA loop, you're going to defeat the MiG pilot. And it's the same for podiatrists becoming bigger and better and more respected and having a better quality of life in their practice, in their marketplace. Because if they're running the OODA loop in their marketing, in their hiring, in their staffing, in their training, and always gathering more valuable information and making each of these things better and better and better, they're going to so outperform the other practices that are in their area that it'll become very noticeable to everybody very quickly.
I think that is a great note to finish on. If people want to learn more about the OODA loop one, you can do the 12-week podiatry business reboot because I do talk about it in there. But Dave, if people want to learn more from you or different programs that you're doing or learn more about the business black ops that I go to each year, what's the best place to go to find out more?
Okay, so because Business Black Ops is a very closed group right at the moment, we're going to open it up in a couple of other countries. Tyson knows about this.
Yeah.
And we're going to open it a little bigger in the United States. We'll have a place where you could go and opt in. But for now, if you wanted to come, if you were an American and listening to this, or if you're in another country and want to come to America for one of those events, the best thing to do is to reach out to my assistant, Lisa Snyder. So that's LSNYDER at UTBF, Uniform Tango Bravo Foxtrot, UTBF.com. And then Lisa will make sure you get on the short list of people that are interested in doing that. You can also follow me on social media, which is not that exciting in and of itself, but it is a place where we announce when these things go on. So it's David M. Fries on Facebook. And all the announcements about those things are there. And there is a Business Black Ops non-members Facebook group too, Tyson. So
yeah, but I'll put all the links in the show notes anyway. Yeah, I'll put links there. And also your book, The Art of Parenting.
The Language of Parenting.
The Language of Parenting. It is an absolute fantastic book. All you can do is forget about that it says parenting. It'd be the language of communicating better with every single person you come in with in your life. That's what the title of the book could have been, because I've read it and I've read it multiple times. And I went, this is a parenting book, but it's not a parenting book.
That's true. Well, originally the title was supposed to be How Spies, Interrogators, and Special Forces Operators Raise Their Kids, but nobody liked that title back in 2004, whenever I wrote that book, whenever it was. But you could still buy it on Amazon. I think if you just search, if you put in quotes, my name, David M. Fries III, like Roman numeral 3.
It is on there.
Yeah.
It is on there because I have grabbed the occasional one and given it to people. So I'll put a link to your book as well in the show notes.
And you could talk about this. We have this outstanding thing. We have a monthly coaching call, but the thing I'm most proud of is we have something called the Business Black Ops Intelligence Briefing. And I think you still get a hard copy of it.
I do get a hard copy. It's sitting over on my desk here. It's about 50 pages every month of absolute gems of information.
And it's all organized. That information is kind of organized around these 3 levels of force multipliers. But there are 2 volumes. The first volume of it every month is sort of strategic thinking, meta level thinking. It gets your brain working in a different way, how to use models and things like that. And then the second one is just a tawdry discussion of how to make more money.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
No, nothing at all.
So I will put all the links in all the show notes. So Dave, I want to thank you for coming on the Podiatry Legends podcast, a legend who is not a podiatrist. And I don't think it'll take people long to figure that out. So Dave, thank you very much for coming on.
Oh, Tyson, thank you for having me. And if anybody if this is another topic where you need me to weigh in, I'm always here. I have a number of podiatrists in the United States that work with me, and they're just the best folks. So always around for you.
You will be back. I will make sure that you're coming back. There's so much more that I know that you can teach me. Like I said, I dragged out the recordings I did in Cairns when you were here.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I found the hard drive where I had everything stored. And I was watching some of the videos and everything going through there. And I went, I've got to get you back a few times just because I think, like I said, this episode will be great. Will be really popular. But I think there's just so much more that podiatrists can learn and apply to their patients. So you will be back like Arnie.
Looking forward to it. Take care.
Okay. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.